Let's go now to Treasurer Jim Chalmers' landmark speech today at the National Press Club, where he laid out the government's financial agenda, starting with an economic round table in the National Cabinet Office between the 19th and 21st of August. Now, the Treasurer today said the government will fulfil its election promises, and that includes the capital gains tax on unrealised gains on big balance superannuation funds. He says the federal budget, though, is unsustainable, and he observed Treasury has identified 4 key reasons why our economy right now is flagging.
Firstly, our economy is not dynamic or innovative enough. Secondly, private investment has picked up, but not by enough to make our capital deep enough. Thirdly, skills aren't abundant enough or matched well enough to the needs of business and industry. And finally, our changing industrial base and the growth in services in particular, where productivity is harder to find and where traditional measures don't always account well for the quality that we're seeking to deliver in services.
All of this, the Treasurer says, is the trigger to accelerate reform across the whole economy. But he does admit there are trade-offs.
There are trade-offs and often difficult trade-offs. You know, if you think about in tax, you think about broadening the base and lowering the rate in some of these sorts of areas, which is an important element of tax reform theory, as Ken and others will tell you. There are always difficult trade-offs associated with that. And so what we're trying to do with this roundtable, but more broadly as well, even absent the roundtable, is to be upfront with all of you and the country beyond about the trade-offs, to recognise that the easiest thing in the world is for people to come to us and say, we want you to dramatically cut the taxes in our part of the economy and spend dramatically more on our industry, without recognising that there are necessary trade-offs associated with that.
The Treasurer was specifically asked about the GST, which previously he said is too hard to change. This time he says it should be at least part of the conversation.
You know that historically I've had a view about the GST. I think it's hard to adequately compensate people, and I think often an increase in the GST is spent 3 or 4 times over by the time people are finished with all of the things that they want to do with it. But what I'm going to try and do, because I know the states will have a view on it, I'm going to try not to kind of, dismiss every idea that I know that people will bring to the round table.
So let's bring in the Ivan Colhoun, the Chief Economist with CreditorWatch, which is uniquely placed to assess the health of Australian businesses right now. Ivan, many thanks for your time. The Treasurer at least appears willing to contemplate changes to our Australian economy to try and boost productivity and hopefully competitiveness as well.
Yeah, look, I think the really positive thing there was they're not wasting the majority they won at the election. So there's a phrase in the speech, he's not ruling in or ruling out different measures, and he actually used that 3-letter GST acronym, which has just been off the agenda for any political party. So he's certainly looking broadly and trying to look at what are the themes and the policies that need to be addressed for really the long term, and that's a very positive development, I think, Ross.
Well, OK, CreditorWatch, you look at the solvency of businesses, the number of companies going broke, whether they're paying their bills. The question is, do we need reform in this country to give more health to Australian businesses, to give more opportunity to employ more people?
Yeah, look, I think there's about 4 questions there. If you look at the latest statistics which we've just put out, insolvencies have actually levelled off in the last 4 or 5 months. That suggests the economy is doing a little bit better. I think that came about or started from the income tax cuts that happened in the middle of last year. It also reflected the tax office, which was catching up to some debts that hadn't been fully collected during COVID, when there was effectively an unofficial amnesty. So there was some catch-ups there. Insolvencies as a share of the number of businesses in Australia, they're not especially high. They're probably at the low end of a normal range, I would say. So there's not that full story. There's not an insolvency, I wouldn't say, reason to be doing this. there are all those other policy reasons the Treasurer was speaking about. Productivity is one. As you know, there's a lot more written about productivity than actually done about productivity. I think when I've looked at productivity quite a lot, actually, and there's a lot of sectoral stories there. The big sectors where productivity is doing badly are mining, banking and finance, construction, education and training. So I think there's a lot of regulation and red tape there. The sectors that are doing well are typically investing in technology, things like telecommunications and media, agriculture. So they're doing well. And I think the big opportunities on the productivity front are really the big sectors and big employers where there isn't very good productivity performance and which the economy is growing in. And those are things like, or sectors like the healthcare sector and the aged care sector and actually public administration. Those are the areas that you can actually do something about and which I think the government needs to focus on. But it's more a sectoral story, or there's quite a few sectoral stories as well as a macro story.
So, but the other aspect of this is that economic growth in Australia is anemic and has been for the last few years. So the reality is that a dose of confidence is needed for business to invest. You need businesses investing, you need businesses making profits, you need businesses confident. That's the key, isn't it, to really try and get the budget in better shape, because if you've got them healthier, then certainly the economy becomes more healthy.
Yeah, well, certainly business confidence is helpful. And if you look at various business surveys, it's only really in the last 6 months that businesses have begun to feel, report conditions that aren't as strong. Now, unfortunately, of course, that's been a policy of the Reserve Bank, has been to effectively slow the economy down, restrain growth, to help rebalance the economy or some of those imbalances that built up during COVID so that we could control inflation. So it's not all government policy. It's also been about inflation control as part of the story.
Indeed. So I tell you what, it's going to be fascinating just to watch exactly who gets invited to this roundtable and then what outcomes, as distinct from words, do emanate from it. I've got to say, always good to chat to you, Ivan Colhoun. Many thanks for your time today.
Thanks, Ross.